Good evening. Welcome to News Connect. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. In the next 60 minutes, we get you an update and analysis on news from India and across the world. Starting with the fact that Europe is going through an economic turmoil. Several European countries are witnessing protests. People have taken to the streets. Whether it is related to the retirement age or in fact their pay or even their housing prices, Europeans are facing a crisis. And today on News Connect, we're going to be discussing exactly this, why this is happening in Europe and what's the way forward. Apart from this, we also discuss the latest ground situation in the Russia-Ukraine war and the G20 updates, the meetings that are happening across India. All of this wrapped up in the next 1 hour. First, the headlines on News Connect. Italian minister warns European Central Bank of risk from higher interest rates. Says Italian economy is improving, but higher interest rates designed to curb inflation could pose a threat to growth. Thousands protests across Portugal against soaring rents and house prices. Portugal is one of Western Europe's poorest countries, and high inflation makes it tougher for people to make ends meet. Bulgarians vote in their 5th parliamentary election in 2 years amid rising resentment towards political elites, who many see as unwilling to tackle draft and economic reforms. Finns cast ballots in a closely contested parliamentary election that could cost left-wing Prime Minister Sanna Marin power amid water concern over the future of generous public services at a time of economic downturn. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi holds talks with his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang in Beijing, calls for early release of detained nationals during talks in China. Second Energy Transitions Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency commences in Gandhinagar. Delegates to engage in detailed deliberations on priority areas during the 3-day meet. Italy seeks to penalize the use of English and other foreign language words in official communications. Under the new legislation introduced by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's party, officials of public administration could face fines of up to €1 lakh on use of foreign language. Former India all-rounder Salim Durrani passes away at the age of 88 at his house in Jamnagar in Gujarat. Durrani was a left-handed batter and left-arm spinner and represented India in 29 tests, scoring 1,202 runs and taking 75 wickets. Prime Minister Narendra Modi condoles the demise of Durrani. All right, let's start with what's happening in Europe. First up about Italy. Italy's economy minister said on Saturday, sending a warning to the European Central Bank. That's what the country has done. The outlook for the Italian economy is improving, but higher interest rates designed to curb inflation could pose a threat to growth. Giancarlo Giorgetti said fighting inflation with monetary policy is not enough. Recession cannot be the price paid for fighting inflation. Giorgetti is from the League Party, which last month criticized the European Central Bank for pushing ahead with its latest 50 basis point rate increase despite turmoil in the banking sector. Speaking with the Ambrosetti Business Forum, Giorgetti confirmed that improvements in the first half of the year would allow Italy to slightly upgrade its official forecast for economic growth of 0.6% in 2023. He also added it would be difficult for the European Union when it comes to reintroducing budget rules that remain suspended until the end of this year. Meanwhile, thousands of people took to the streets of Lisbon and other cities across Portugal on Saturday in a protest against soaring rents and house prices at a time when high inflation is making it even tougher for people to make ends meet. One of the protesters said that this is a social emergency as the situation is really hard on the young. Meanwhile, a study showed that the average rent of a one-bedroom flat in Lisbon is around 1,350 euros. The socialist government announced last month a housing package that, among other measures, ended the controversial Golden Visa scheme and banned new licenses for Airbnb properties. But critics say it is not enough to lower prices in the short term. According to a study by insurance brokers, CIA landlords, low wages and high rents make Lisbon the world's third largest viable city to live in. As in Portugal's current 8.2% inflation rate has exacerbated the problem.
I feel that it's a really big issue, and I was affected as well. I've been affected by this issue, the rental and the housing issue in Lisbon. I think it's the worst situation in the city than other cities in Europe. So I feel it a lot, and I want to contribute to make the situation better.
Now, the merger between banks Credit Suisse and UBS could see up to 36,000 jobs being cut across the world. The Sonntag Zeitung Weekly reported on Sunday that the takeover by UBS of Credit Suisse was hastily arranged by the Swiss government on the 19th of March to prevent a global financial meltdown following fears of contagion from the collapse of banks in the United States. Now, UBS announced on Wednesday that it would bring back former chief executive Sergio Ermotti to handle the huge risks involved in the Swiss banking giant's controversial absorption of its troubled rival Credit Suisse. On Sunday, citing internal anonymous sources, Sonntag Zeitung said management was mulling cutting between 20 and 30% of the workforce, meaning between 25 and 36,000 jobs. Up to 11,000 jobs could be cut in Switzerland alone, according to the Weekly, which did not provide details of which posts could be targeted. Before this merger, UBS and Credit Suisse had employed slightly more than 72,000 and 50,000 people respectively. UBS and Credit Suisse, the second biggest bank in Switzerland, were both among the select banks around the world considered to be global systematically important financial institutions and therefore deemed too big to fail. All right, let's get more perspective on this and try and understand why Europe is going through this kind of an economic turmoil. I'm joined by Professor Gulshan Sachdev from the School of International Studies, JNU. Professor Sachdev, welcome to DD India. Good evening, sir. You know, we're seeing a very interesting situation in Europe, if I may call it. It is something that we couldn't expect probably decades back, with Europe being one of the most developed continents of the world. But today we're seeing an economic turmoil, whether it's Portugal or France or Germany even. People have taken to the streets. You know, starting from pay cuts to retirement age to losing their jobs, they have various reasons of taking to the streets and the kind of frustration that we are seeing on the roads of these countries. But really, what do you think are the reasons which are attributable to this kind of situation in European countries currently?
Well, thank you for having me. Well, you know, I mean, I think what is happening in Europe, there are two issues. One is there are some long-term, issues which Europe has been facing for quite some time. Like they have, adverse demography and all other issues. And there are also some very recent current problems, particularly in the last 1 year because of the Ukraine war. Now, but we also must understand that, as a result of the whole integration measures or the whole integration projects within Europe in the last couple of decades, European economies are very much integrated, whether they are part of the EU or even if countries which are not part of the EU, they are also very much integrated in one European economy. And as the largest kind of trader and investor, European economy is also very much integrated with the global economy. And they also have still very high productivity rates, and per capita incomes are still very high. Now, what is really happening now, what you can see, there are two things which has happened in the last few years. Of course, earlier also they saw a very serious crisis in the Eurozone. But now, after the pandemic, it was expected that like anywhere else, European economy would be growing, very fast. And in 2022, actually, you can see they had a reasonably good growth. I mean, 3.5% in the whole EU, which is quite, I would say respectable in the European context. But now, because of the Ukraine war, they have, basically the energy prices were high, and all the energy diversification which has happened in the or continue to happen now, and inflation, what most of the European countries saw last year and continue to see even this year. I mean, many economies have seen between 8 to 10% inflation, which is unprecedented in Europe, because Europe haven't seen, most of the European countries never saw this kind of inflation in the last 35 years. So some of the countries still we have about 7, 8, 9% inflation. So as a result, obviously now this is hurting, and the growth is also now, since last year the prices were high. Energy prices also went high. So now the impact of this is seen now this year. This year, most of the major economies in Europe, you look at Germany, you look at France, you look at Italy, Netherlands. Now, all these economies are not going to grow, 0.3, 0.4, 0.7%, depending on which economy we are talking about. Overall, I think the expectation from the European Commission itself is that the economy, the EU economy will not grow more than 0.7, 0.8% in 2023. I mean, there'll be some, more growth, about 1.5% or so in 2024. So it means in the next 2 years, one is seeing that the impact of that is very much there. And then there are also, since, it's also very much integrated with the global economy. So since we have, some kind of banking crisis in the US, that is also to some extent there is a possibility, some people are talking about it may affect European banking system as well. But since they had the major crisis earlier in 2014-15, so they have built really a very solid system. There is also banking union, so it means that somehow that impact may not be there. But at the moment you have inflationary pressure, low growth. And but at the same time, unemployment rates are still, not high at all. I mean, there is still possibility that they have to import people from outside. Immigration will continue because most of the economies do face labor shortages. But of course, those kind of immigration may also have, other social and political problems in Europe.
Yeah.
So as we have many issues, long-standing issues and contemporary issues. And of course, the labor, particularly since the real incomes have kind of declined in the last 1 year, and most of the labor force in Europe is also very much unionized. So you can see now it's not just only France where in fact large protests are being seen because of the retirement age has been going to be raised, but you also see in fact protest also in Germany, protest in Netherlands, in Italy, Portugal, many other countries. And so, those that will also have perhaps some kind of political impact in all the elections which are going to come.
Yeah. Which is what I was coming to next, Professor Sachdev, the fact that the kind of problem that European countries and the US face more than perhaps the Southeast Asian region and the Asian countries in general is the problem of an aging population, and therefore the labor shortage that they are witnessing right now, and therefore fewer hands to contribute to the economy, and this challenge of course increases in the post-pandemic world that we live in the post-war world that we live in. This kind of a problem, how do European countries and developed nations really deal with?
Well, I mean, there are two ways they can deal. This is what they have been doing it. One, of course, is that you have to have more and more mechanization, and particularly now with all the digitization and artificial intelligence. And anyway, as I was saying, the productivity levels of most of the actually European countries are still pretty high. So at one level, I think through all these new technologies and mechanization, they are going to handle. Second, but of course, you do need ultimately some people somewhere to work, and some of the services have to be provided by people only. So they have to continue to have, attract, talent from outside. Now there are problems because all countries in Europe and the US, they are willing to basically accommodate skilled and semi-skilled labor force, because this is what, depending on which sectors there is demand. But there is also, we also know that there is also a lot of illegal, or I wouldn't say illegal, but some irregular migration also is taking place to Europe. That also creates certain kinds of social and political tensions within all the European countries. And as a result of your economic problems, as a result of this immigration from outside, and that also in the past we have also seen that has also linked to some kind of security challenges within Europe. So this is creating a kind of mix, which is on the basis of which many of the political parties are making those issues the top issues. And we have also seen that many of the right-wing political parties have gained in some of the countries. It's not just only they have entered parliament. In fact, some of the countries, they are also part of the coalition governments. So it means that this is also affecting their politics. But ultimately, everybody realizes that they would need people from outside, and they'll continue to have, people from outside. But of course, they want to be very selective, and they want to be basically they want to attract more and more talented people rather than irregular migration. And for that, of course, they are working with all the third countries, including with India as well.
Yeah. One of the reasons, Professor Sachdev, that we perhaps don't place a lot of emphasis in when it comes to the economy is getting affected is perhaps climate change and the kind of increasing ecological footprint that humanity has right now. In the context of that, help us understand how economies are really affected directly or indirectly when it comes to climate change, especially in developed countries like the European countries.
Well, as far as the Europe is concerned, they do have ambition to play a leading role as far as the climate change or climate mitigation, concerns are there. And they do have all their plans, in fact, even before the, current energy crisis happened. So you have, by 2050, of course, most of the European countries, they have the net zero target. In fact, some of the countries even much before that. And they had all the targets for 2025, 2030, and all the finances, etc. was also kind of, made available for this kind of transition. But now, because of energy crisis, the last 1 year, because we all know that they were heavily dependent on Russia, most of the countries in Europe for the energy needs, particularly for gas and oil, and even coal to some extent. Now that diversification, political decision has been taken to diversify away from Russia. So they are moving away. As a result of this, some of the targets have also been missed, or they're going to be, I would say the timetable will have to be rearranged again. Germany was going to have in 2022 the nuclear phase out, similarly coal phase out after some years. Now, some of this timetable has been, I think, rearranged because it will take some more time now for some of these issues to happen. But I think the overall, direction, they haven't really changed. In fact, as a result of what has happened in the last 1 year, most countries are also, in fact, also going more towards, renewable, because that's what perhaps they feel is the answer. But of course, on the nuclear issue, there is no one unanimity within the European member states. So the European Union, of course, is concerned mainly about the safety and other concern. So some countries are kind of very much against nuclear energy, but some countries perhaps will have some more nuclear power coming in their country. So different countries are moving differently, but overall I think direction is there that they would be able to achieve some of their targets, because 2020 targets, what they had, I think all the countries were able to achieve, because one of the reasons was also that between 2012 and 2020, when the targets were set, the growth rate in most of the European countries were relatively low. So as a result, they were able to achieve most of those targets. So now all the targets, particularly for 2025 and 2030, depending on, of course, many circumstances, but I think they would be there is a much more ambitious program to have energy transition and more renewables in the coming years in Europe. And they do want to have not just, and they also see, in fact, a lot of economic opportunities in green transition, because the estimates are that most of your automobiles in the next 10-15 years are going to be a different kind. You have to have all the different processes in the industries. Most of the industries would be going more green. So any industry which is going to take lead will also have a lot of economic opportunities. And I think if you look at the Germany's Energy Day program, it's just about whole transformation of the economy. It's not just only about energy transition. So it means this is what the energy transition is a big goal. At the same time, this also, perhaps they feel that this will also provide a lot of economic opportunities to European industries, so they can take lead in some of those industries. But of course, there are also costs, because some of the industries, perhaps since you now change to relatively more, I would say, costlier kind of alternatives. So in the short run, maybe some industries may have to pay more, but these are the kind of debates in which Europe is engaging itself.
Professor Sachdev, also, Europe is caught in a changing geopolitical order, geostrategic order, and therefore geoeconomic and geotechnological orders are also transforming across the world. In such a situation where we have the Russia-Ukraine war, we also have an increasing Chinese aggression. How does Europe ensure really that it does not get caught up as the middle power, or does not really, of course, directly there is an impact, but how can it really minimize those effects?
Well, this is, I think, the major challenge at the moment they are facing. In fact, as we speak this week, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the French President Macron, they would be traveling to China. And the major security challenge, as we have seen, for them, it's the Ukraine war, which is, they're very much engaged, and they are supporting Ukraine, economically, financially, diplomatically, and also militarily. So they also know that they also, we have seen that since this particular commission, they wanted to be the geopolitical European Union. So now we have also seen their the Indo-Pacific strategy from the European Commission. At the same time, also some of the independent, some of the member states of the EU, like Germany, France, Netherlands, and even now Czech Republic has come up its own Indo-Pacific strategy. The idea still, I think, what can read, in fact, just a few days back, the European Commission President, when she delivered a talk on EU's China relations in Brussels, and she was trying to, earlier, because of assertive China, at the same time, they have also, the European Union also have close to roughly about 900 billion euro goods and services trade annually now with China. So as a major kind of economic powers, they are also deeply engaged with each other. At the same time, Europe is also worried about assertive China, and they also have very serious kind of interests within the Indo-Pacific region, particularly the economic interests within the Indo-Pacific region. They have realized that this is a very economically dynamic region. So they want to play a very significant role within this Indo-Pacific region. But there is also reality that there is a very serious geopolitical competition happening, or tension between United States and China at the moment. So Europe is kind of trying to protect its economic interest in the world, because they are also very much integrated, and also in the Indo-Pacific region. At the same time, they do not want to be part of any serious geopolitical competition, and so they're trying to kind of balance. At the same time, now the major, of course, the strategic challenge for them is now is Russia. So to some extent, their focus more is at the moment toward Russia, how the, the Ukrainian situation unfold, and Europe is also Russia is also just next to them. In Asia and in Indo-Pacific, there are more economic interests, but of course there is also geopolitical competition here. But there are very serious dilemmas as far as the Europe is concerned. But of course, the broadly, of course, they are very much part of the transatlantic alliance. Their security is very much part of the NATO alliance. So whenever there is any security challenge, security issue happens, of course, all the NATO countries and the United States with Europe, they will come together. This is what we have seen earlier in Afghanistan. This is what we have seen now. We are seeing now in Ukraine. So the main, I would say the whole economic architecture in which Europe has been working for that whole economic integration within Europe. There are certain challenges there which they are trying to kind of address. Of course, we have also seen Brexit has happened, but somehow they've been able to manage that exit, somehow after the agreement with the UK.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the security issues are concerned, the strategic issues are concerned, Russia, of course, at one point of time was a strategic partner of the European Union.
Yeah.
But now that's what the major security challenge is. And for any security challenge, they have to basically depend on the US and also on the NATO. And in fact, now as we are seeing, countries like Sweden and Finland, they are, Finland only becoming part of the NATO, and Sweden, of course, would also like to be.
Yeah.
So there are major changes which are taking place. But since Europe still a very important, I would say, economic player, at the same time they do have huge capacities to influence institutions of global governance. Whether you look at G7, whether you look at G20, or even in the UNSC, you do have France and UK part of the part of the UNSC as well.
Sure.
So it means they do have influence in many institutions. So whatever happens in Europe is going to affect everybody else as well.
Sure. Professor Sachdev, amid all of this, how does India get impacted? How far does it get impacted? And how should we really look and deal with this situation?
Well, Europe has always been very important for India for trade and investment matters, and I think it will continue to be very important for us. That's why we have now restarted our negotiations on the trade agreement and also on the investment agreement. Now, because India's relations with the United States has also become very close, so because of close transatlantic partnership, what we have also seen that India's ties with the European countries and also with the EU has, it has also become very close in the last, particularly in the last 5-10 years. So we, apart from the trade negotiation, we also have now, connectivity partnership with the European Union. We are also established trade and technology council. So, and of course, on the broader issues, strategic issues in the Indo-Pacific, etc., we are also working together. So Europe will continue to be important for us, but at the same time, yes, we have also seen that as far as the Ukraine issue is concerned, India's perceptions are different than what the European perceptions for this particular conflict are. I think since our interest converges on most of the issues, we'll continue to work together. And we have been talking about those issues, even about Ukraine. And in fact, under India's G20 presidency, many of the Europeans would also like India to play a much bigger role, because India also has close ties with Russia as well. So India and Europe will continue to work because our interests converge. But to some extent, our perceptions about Ukraine may or may not affect in the long run. But of course, the broader, otherwise the issues have come together, and we will continue to work together with Europe. But if since the European economy is also an important, our export market, and we also have, more than about 20-25% investment also has come from the European countries to India. So if European economy is having certain issues, certain problems, that obviously is going to have negative impact on us. So we'll continue to hope that European economy will prosper, and since in the month or in the coming months, we'll also have some kind of trade agreement negotiations concluded. So we'll be able to integrate more and more with the European economy. It's not just only about trade and investment. If you look at the numbers of, in fact, financial and technical collaborations of Indian companies, roughly about 1/3 of all that financial and technical collaborations of Indian companies are with the European company.
Right.
So
All right.
many companies in India, when they are integrating the global economy, so their integration with the European markets and European companies is also
Right.
very.
All right, Professor Gulshan Sachdev, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on DD India and sharing your perspective on the turmoil, economic turmoil that Europe is going through currently. Well, Italy's ruling Brothers of Italy party has introduced a new legislation, and this is an interesting one, penalizing the use of English and other foreign language words in official communications. Under the new legislation introduced by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's party, officials of the public administration could face fines up to 1 lakh euros on the use of foreign language. Fabio Rampelli, a member of the lower chamber of deputies, introduced the legislation, which is supported by the Prime Minister. Now, the bill is yet to go up for parliamentary debate. With the legislation encompasses all foreign languages, it is particularly geared at Anglomania, or the use of English words, which the draft states demeans and mortifies the Italian language, adding that it is even worse because the UK is no longer part of the European Union. Moving on, Finns cast their ballots on Sunday in a closely contested parliamentary election that could cost left-wing Prime Minister Sanna Marin power amid voter concern over the future of generous public services at a time of economic downturn. No party is seen as holding a decisive lead, and the election is likely to be followed by lengthy coalition talks, although whichever party wins will have the first attempt at forming a government. Now, the National Coalition has led in polls for almost 2 years, although its lead has melted away in the recent months. It has promised to curb spending and stop the rise of public debt, which has reached just over 70% of the GDP since Sanna Marin took office in 2019. The grouping accuses Marin of eroding Finland's economic resilience at a time when Europe's energy crisis, driven by Russia's war in Ukraine, has hit the country hard and the cost of living has increased. The Finns party too calls for austerity, but its main goal is to reduce what its leader Riikka Purra has called harmful immigration from developing countries outside the European Union. Bulgaria held the general elections for the 5th time in 2 years amid contentions over the war in Ukraine. Bulgarians are going to polls again because no party managed to form the government in the last round of parliamentary polls, which were held 6 months ago. The main contenders in Sunday's polls are the same as in the recent polls. Latest polls, meanwhile, have suggested a tight race between centre-right Prime Minister Boyko Borisov's Gerb party and ex-Prime Minister Kirill Petkov's liberal We Continue the Change. In other news, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi held talks with his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang on Sunday in Beijing, marking the first trip to China by a Japanese foreign minister in more than 3 years. The trip comes amid tensions between the two countries over issues such as an ongoing territorial spat over the islands in the South China Sea and the recent detention in Beijing by Chinese authorities of a Japanese national who works for pharmaceutical company Astellas. The Japanese foreign minister told his counterpart that their countries were facing many important challenges and issues. All right, let's shift focus and get you all the G20 updates back home. The second meeting of G20 Sherpas concludes today in Kottayam in Kerala. Over 120 delegates from G20 members, 9 invitee countries and various international and regional organizations attended this meeting. Detailed discussions on the main priority areas identified by the presidency were held, with the first session focusing on technological transformation and the second one on accelerated, inclusive and resilient growth as well as women-led development. The Sherpas took stock of the progress made in the various G20 Sherpa track working groups. Now, Thrissur Puram, a must-see spectacle, captures the essence of Kerala's rich history and traditions. It was truly an awe-inspiring experience for G20 Sherpa and delegates in Kumarakom that left them spellbound. Now, when in Kerala, you cannot miss out on the experience of Vallam Kal, also known as the snake boat race. These breathtaking visuals from Kumarakom captivated the minds of G20 India delegates. right, Amritpal Singh joins us now from Kumarakom in Kerala. He's been tracking this meeting of the Sherpas, G20 Sherpa. Amrit, good evening. Important meeting there. As always, the Sherpa meeting sets the agenda for the successive G20 meetings that happen across the country. In this particular one, get us the main highlights of this meeting, which has now concluded in Kerala.
This meeting, Shreya, was essentially to take stock of how far the grouping has come under India's presidency. The first meeting was held, the first Sherpa meeting was held in Udaipur, where India listed out its priorities and they negotiated the agenda. After that, over 50 working group meetings have taken place across, not just working groups, engagement groups, initiatives included, have taken place in about 30 cities all over the country. So they took the stock of how far they have traveled, what they need to do more, because India is already halfway into its presidency. The Leaders Summit is scheduled for the 9th and 10th of September. So what more needs to be done, what needs to be fast-paced, where consensus, they can't arrive at a consensus, how can they work towards arriving at a consensus. So essentially the second Sherpa meeting did all this over the past 3 days, under of course the various issues that you spoke about, technological transformation, women-led development, green development, resilient inclusive growth, debt financing, etc. These issues were discussed at length, but it was a stock-taking meeting of where the grouping has come and where it needs to go.
And Amrit, the fact that we're talking about technological transformation, women-led development, these are areas where India is leading the front. Under India's G20 presidency, how do we as a country really put forth the kind of agenda that we have set for the G20 presidency?
We don't set the agenda alone, Shreya. The grouping sets the agenda. The presidency puts out its priorities, and then, because it's a consensual organization or a consensual grouping, really, not an organization, so the agenda is agreed by all. Whatever is objected to even a single member in that room is kept outside the agenda. What we've set out is our priorities, which essentially include growth which is more resilient, which is more sustainable, putting the focus on achieving the sustainable development goals as fast as the world can agree to do so, and also in making sure that the voice of the global south is heard, not only heard but factored into the narrative which shapes the world. After all, they have control about 85% of the world's GDP and a significant part of the world's population. So what they decide to do, the rest, it has a bearing on the rest of the world. So India's priorities clearly are what I've listed out, and India's pushing towards that. But by the end of it, it's consensus. What the outcome document at the Leaders Summit will contain is what everybody agrees on. What countries don't agree upon are left out of that outcome document. So what they're trying to do at this stage is, of course, push these priorities, but also build a consensus around issues which are tricky, which are thorny, including the ongoing conflict and its effect on the world, disruption of global supply chains, etc.
Yeah.
So though there are huge divergences within the grouping, but they're trying to push them towards a consensus.
All right, Amritpal Singh, thank you very much for joining us and getting us all those updates from the Sherpa meeting that just concluded in Kerala's Kottayam. Meanwhile, the second tourism working group meeting got underway in Siliguri on Saturday. Speaking at the inaugural session, the Union Minister G. Kishan Reddy highlighted the efforts to promote tourism. India would be hosting the Global Tourism Investors Summit in Delhi. Speaking at the inaugural session of the second tourism working group meeting in Siliguri, the Union Minister said that the Modi government has formed a tourism policy which has a holistic approach.
Our vision to make India a $1 trillion tourism economy by 2047, our 100 year of India's independence celebration with 100 million international visitors to India. To achieve this, we are focusing on the convergence of various government-led initiatives and public-private partnership.
The minister also said that India has many possibilities to attract adventure tourists from different countries. He said that the Northeast can offer a variety of activities like trekking, rafting, kayaking, safari.
With a unique and unparalleled natural heritage of Himalayan long coastline, forest, deserts, which offers a great advantage for adventure tourism in our country. If we have to develop true potential of India as a tourist destination, we must develop adventure tourism in the country. It can be a significant part of India's tourism sector during the Amrit Kal.
Now, the second G20 Tourism Working Group meeting at Siliguri, Darjeeling began with some yoga session on day 2. Yoga keeps our body, mind and soul fit, and so to keep the world healthy with the G20 motto of One Earth, One Family, One Future. Why not increase our immunity, and that too without an extra expense? Experts from all over the world specializing in adventure tourism have gathered in Siliguri, and adventure is nature and yoga is the best fitness medicine. DD India correspondent Vishal Baristo talked with yoga practitioners there. Listen in. All right, Vishal Baristo is joining us right now from Siliguri to get us more on the second G20 Tourism Working Group meeting. Vishal, good evening. Important meeting there happening at Siliguri. I believe Vishal is not able to hear me currently. We'll try and reconnect with Vishal Baristo again and get you those updates on the second G20 tourism meeting, which is currently underway in Siliguri. But let me also get you more about another G20 meeting that is happening in Agartala. The two-day G20 Science Summit on Clean Energy for Greener Future will begin from tomorrow in Agartala. Foreign delegates, which is around 85 of them, have begun arriving in Agartala for the two-day summit that is going to be held at the Hapania International Fairground in the capital of Tripura from tomorrow. The Tripura government has taken a host of initiatives to make the two-day G20 conclave a success. Meanwhile, the second Energy Transitions Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency began at Gandhinagar in Gujarat today. This second meeting is expected to revisit the key takeaways from the previous meeting and take the discussions forward, leading to building consensus on key areas. The meeting commenced with a special address by the Minister of State for Ayush and Women and Child Development, Mahendra Bhai Munjpara, where he said that India's G20 presidency promises great hope and aspirations, and we are aiming to collectively find the immediate and pressing challenges of global warming, climate change and energy security. The three side events are being held on the sidelines of this meeting. The first side event was held on global green hydrogen ecosystem, enabling zero pathways. Further, in the working group meeting, a seminar on accelerate cooling as a key enabler towards energy transition and diversified renewable energy supply chains for advancing energy transitions will also be held. The Indian presidency is focusing on 6 priority areas, including technology gaps, low-cost financing, energy security and diversified supply chains, energy efficiency, fuels for the future and universal access to clean energy. Meanwhile, EV startup Switch Bikes are showcasing their EV bikes to the delegates at the second Energy Transitions Working Group meeting at Gandhinagar. Premium foldable electric cycle brand Switch is consumer-friendly e-bike which is easy to use and carry, and the products are getting a good response and are generating interests among the delegates. All right, we have Vishal with us now, who's been tracking the second tourism working group meeting, which is underway in Siliguri. Vishal, good evening. Important meeting there, Vishal, considering the fact that we are living in a post-pandemic era, and we know that the tourism sector was one of the sectors which was majorly impacted by the COVID pandemic. In terms of, countries coming together at this G20 meeting on tourism, what are really the priority or the key areas that the meeting will be focusing upon?
Well, a very good evening to you, Shreya. Yes, indeed, you very correctly said that the pandemic has been a big roadblock or bottleneck as far as tourism is concerned. But now we are back to normal, and here at the second tourism working group meeting, all the deliberation is as to how India can become the 10 top nations as far as adventure tourism is concerned. I have with me Morba. She is from the World Tourism Organization. She is from Washington. So let's ask Morba, when it comes to India and when it comes to tourism, what are the deliberations that have come up in this second working group meeting?
Thank you very much. And just to say that I'm with the Center for Public Impact and very glad to be partners with the UN World Tourism Organization. And today's conversations have been really interesting, talking about the need to incorporate indigenous communities in all tourism, the value chain of tourism. The other thing that's been quite interesting is really looking at how we can develop the desirability of the tourism industry for youth in particular, and showing that it can actually be a long-term career choice for the youth. And in India, but of course, because this is a global convening for all countries. The other thing that's been quite interesting is looking at inclusion. So how are we ensuring that destinations are set up for all people, those who have disabilities, for elderly, I'll say that the one other thing that has been a trend throughout is looking at adventure tourism as really a way to explore green tourism and sustainability a little bit further.
Now, is it your first time that you are visiting India, and especially this part of the country?
Yes, it's my first time, and I have to say that I'm originally from Zambia, and India has a lot of similarities to my country, so it's been such a pleasure to feel both the familiarity as well as the warmth of your country. Your people, the hospitality has been unmatched, and really such beautiful scenic surroundings as well.
Talking about Darjeeling, which is known for its tea, have you tried tea, and what did you like the most?
The white tea is a new thing for me now. It's been really wonderful to see the entire process. And again, connecting back to indigenous practices, it's been really great to see as well how that has been incorporated and really maintained and honored in how you think about tea and produce tea and share tea with the world. So it's been fascinating not just to enjoy it in its consumption, but also understanding and learning through our time here in Darjeeling.
So there you hear Shreya, people are so very excited. She's from Zambia and she thinks that it is...
Yeah, Vishal, could you also ask her, the fact that she mentioned sustainable and green tourism, and we know that, we are seeing the impact of climate change across the world. At the World Tourism Organization, how are they really planning to deal with this issue and encourage nations to come forward and make sure that green and sustainable tourism is practiced across their country, considering also the fact that now we are seeing a new concept of environmental refugees also coming in?
Well, absolutely. My colleague in Delhi, she wants to ask you about the challenges posed by the climate change and the green development, because she was there, she covered the first meeting in Run of Kutch. So what do you have to say on that?
One thing that keeps coming up through today's conversations is really looking at greenhouse gas emissions and ensuring that we're not just looking to becoming net zero, moving towards net zero, but really going beyond that and capturing and producing new things from those carbon emissions. The other thing is really ensuring that sustainable tourism is the same as green tourism, and ensuring that there's a similarity, and really we're seeing one-to-one when we're thinking about the two. I'll say those are the two things that stand out to me from today's discussion, but it has been, I will say, one of the priority areas that have been discussed throughout the last few days that we've been here.
So I hope, Shreya, you got your answer because a lot of deliberations are on, but there's still a long way to go. Even if India wants to become the top 10 country as far as adventure tourism are concerned, we still need to develop, have a skilled manpower. We need to have more public-private partnership, and at the same time, yes, the natural beauty is always there to support us.
Absolutely. All right, Vishal Baristo, thank you very much for joining us with those inputs. And of course, our guest from the World Tourism Organization, also thank you very much for joining us on DD India and getting us a perspective on the second Tourism Working Group meeting. All right, moving on, the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jayashankar along with Bengaluru South MP Tejasvi Surya met with the youth at Kubon Park in the heart of Bengaluru this morning. Both the leaders spent their time by taking questions from Bengaluru's youngsters on topics ranging from India's foreign policy, G20 summit and the upcoming Karnataka Assembly elections. Former India all-rounder Salim Durrani has passed away at the age of 88. He was living with his brother Jahangir Durrani in Gujarat's Jamnagar. Born in Kabul in 1934, Durrani had created a special rapport with the spectators with his aggressive style of batting and acquired the reputation of hitting sixes on demand.
Former India all-rounder Salim Durrani has passed away at the age of 88 at his house in Jamnagar, Gujarat on Sunday. Durrani had undergone a proximal femoral nail surgery after he broke his thigh bone in a fall in January this year. Durrani played 29 tests for India and took 75 wickets with the best bowling figure of 10 for 177. With the bat in hand, he scored 1,202 runs with the highest score of 104 against West Indies in 1962. The former all-rounder was famous for his heroic performance in India's series victory against England in 1961-62. He scalped 8 and 10 wickets in the Kolkata and Chennai tests to guide India to a 2-0 series victory. Born to Afghan parents with a Pathani lineage, Durrani entertained the fans right from his first Ranji Trophy match against Gujarat and bowled with a lot of cunning. Dropped for 4 seasons from 1967 to 1970, Durrani was recalled to the Indian team for the 1971 tour of the West Indies, where he was chiefly instrumental in India's historic first series win there. Durrani made his test debut against Australia in 1960 at Mumbai's Brabourne Stadium. He played his last test match against England on 6 February 1973. Interestingly, his debut match and last match of the Brabourne Stadium in Mumbai. The stylish cricketer aggregated 8,545 runs at 33.37 in first-class cricket and hit 14 hundreds. India's first Arjuna Award winner in cricket, Durrani was a tall man and could get the ball to lift and turn on any surface with a bit of help. In domestic cricket, Durrani played Ranji Trophy for Saurashtra, Rajasthan and Gujarat. The star cricketer also dabbled in Bollywood, starring opposite renowned actor Praveen Babi in the movie Charitra in 1973. Sports Desk, DD India.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed grief via a series of tweets over the cricketer's demise. I quote him, Salim Durrani ji was a cricketing legend, an institution in himself. He made a key contribution to India's rise in the world of cricket. On and off the field, he was known for his style, pained by his demise. Condolences to his family and friends. May his soul rest in peace. Salim Durrani ji had a very old and strong association with Gujarat. He played for Saurashtra and Gujarat for a few years. He also made Gujarat his home. I have had the opportunity to interact with him and was deeply impressed by his multifaceted persona. He will surely be missed. Unquote. Prime Minister Modi shared his memories with Durrani during various occasions as well. He said that on one occasion, it was the January 2004 at a program in Jamnagar in which a statue of the great cricketer Vinu Mukherjee was inaugurated. Meanwhile, Union Minister for INB and Youth Affairs and Sports Anurag Singh Thakur posted a picture and expressed sadness over the news. He tweeted, and I quote, "Sad to hear about the demise of Salim Durrani ji, a true inspiration to generations of cricketers in India. His talent and skills on the field will continue to inspire us. My heartfelt condolences to his family and friends. Rest in peace, Durrani ji," unquote. In Cambodia, as part of the upcoming Khmer New Year celebrations, Kampong Spo province has organized its annual bullock cart race in Rokathom commune, Chabarmon city in the Kampong Spo provinces. Take a look at those visuals. And with that, we wrap up News Connect, but news and updates will continue on DD India. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Bye-bye.